This is Terms of Reference Podcast number 173.
It's a program that we run here at the Patent and Trademark Office. It's to recognize inventors, innovators, people in your normal audience who are using technology to benefit the less fortunate around the world.
This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. For most of us seeking to innovate in the social sector, solving existing problems in new ways is accomplished by bringing technologies or processes from other sectors to bear on the problems faced by the vulnerable. However, innovators are sometimes also true inventors, devising first-of-their-kind solutions for today's most pressing problems. In these cases, it's not uncommon for the inventor to seek protection for the unique intellectual property contained in their ideas. After all, what benefits those in need may also turn out to be something that's also extremely useful for those with greater levels of disposable income. Patents are one type of protection that are recognized around the world and, assuming you have the financial and legal resources, enforceable. Enter the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Since 2012, the USPTO has given awards to businesses, universities, and nonprofits using patented technology to aid the less fortunate. My guest for the 173rd Terms of Reference podcast is Edward Elliot, who manages the Patents for Humanity program. For those inventors out there, you're going to find this conversation extremely useful and potentially rewarding. For the rest of us Aidpreneurs, our conversation is a fun and surprising discussion about past awardees and the massive impact they've had on global issues. I spoke with Edward in Alexandria, Virginia. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor.
The Terms of Reference podcast is sponsored by International Solutions Group, helping to improve the social impact of governments, UN agencies, NGOs, and companies for more than 10 years. Visit ISG online at www.theisg.com.
Hello, Edward. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for having me on.
Edward, I know where you're sitting, but why don't you tell everybody where you're sitting today?
So I'm at the Patent and Trademark Office in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Most of our listeners are super familiar, obviously, with Washington, D.C., but I'm going to bet that most everyone is going to, right now scratching their heads, why the heck are we talking to the Patent Office? A lot of the people that we have on the show are, they're tech, they're wonks, or they've come up with some new process, so I guess there could be a connection there. But we're talking to you here, it's the 1st of November in the year 2017. And you are the guy who manages something called Patents for Humanity at USPTO.
That's right.
As we usually start these episodes, rather than having me butcher it, why don't you tell us about what exactly is Patents for Humanity?
Yeah, so it's a program that we run here at the Patent and Trademark Office. It's to recognize inventors, innovators, people in your normal audience who are using technology to benefit the less fortunate around the world. So we here in developed countries take for granted that innovation is a process that happens and it gets new technologies to market and it improves all our lives. There's very good mechanisms to do that in the U.S. and most of Europe and advanced economies. But in other parts of the world, it's not so easy where the market structures are lacking and can be difficult to get those technologies out there. And so our program is to reward those who are overcoming those challenges and who are getting technologies out there to help people with issues such as medicines, clean water, sanitation, just sort of basic humanitarian needs, things that we take for granted and don't have to worry about in our day-to-day lives.
So is this something that you woke up, Edward, one day and you kind of hey, I work at the Patent and Trademark Office, I want to champion this? Was this a groundswell from within the organization? Was this a mandate? Where did this come from?
Well, so it was not originally my idea, but I came to the office in 2010, and it was the first project that was handed to me. And it was basically just an idea at that point and said, hey, we'd like to do something with humanitarian technologies and helping the patent community who are working on those. So there wasn't much to it, but they gave it to me, and I took the reins, and we spent about a year just developing the program, talking to different groups, talking to companies, to nonprofits, to universities, anybody who works in the innovation community, and people who work with the developing world as well. Got a lot of input and a lot of great ideas, and we're able to structure this program out of that.
Do you have to have a patent or a trademark in order to apply to be a part of it, or is this just sort of a wide net, like somebody can nominate you for it?
Yeah, so people that are interested can apply on their own behalf. You do have to have a U.S. patent or patent application in order to qualify. It could be a patent that you own, or it could be a patent that you license, so you don't have to actually own a patent to do it. But it has to be some patent that covers the technology that you're using. And, we recognize that there are other uses of non-patented technology being used for humanitarian purposes, but just falls a little bit outside of our mission here at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So for now, we're focused on the patented technologies.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, have you had anybody come to the door and knock up and say, hey, look, we're doing a great thing over here. We built this great tech, but we just, we can't spend the X amount of dollars to roll a patent up or anything like that. Has that been an issue at all, or not so much so far?
We do run into, especially individual inventors all the time for whom funds are always tight, but we always try to refer them to resources that may help. There's a pro bono program for inventors who can't afford the legal fees to obtain patents. Our office doesn't run that program, but we coordinate with various bar organizations around the country who do, so sometimes we refer people to that program. I will say that typically we haven't had to turn any away so far, which is great because of those issues. Usually by the time people get to the point that they're actually getting their technology out there to help people in developing countries, it's several years after they first developed it, and by that point, they've been able to get their patents.
Well, I'd love to dive in. In 2016, you recognized 4 recipients with this award, and you had 2 honorable mentions. And it's not totally honest. I was taken aback a little bit, maybe not taken aback, but surprised by the awardees. Right at the top of the list is the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, not an organization that I would consider innovative. But why don't you pick either 1 or 2 of your favorite awardees and tell us about why they ultimately got selected?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with the Food and Drug Administration, just because you mentioned them, and like you said, a lot of people may be surprised. But they do have a lot of research scientists on their staff, and for this particular award, those scientists had worked on developing an improved meningitis vaccine. So meningitis is an issue that affects a lot of Central Africa, a number of countries in there, and hundreds of millions of people used to suffer from it. And making the vaccines available to them was very difficult because they were difficult to manufacture and they had to be kept at a certain temperature, and it was just hard to get them out there to people without the infrastructure in those countries. So the FDA worked on an improved process for creating a better vaccine that could withstand the conditions out in the field, and it's been used to immunize over 235 million people in African countries. So helped a lot of people out there. Well, all of our winners have great stories, but another one that I'll talk about just from last year. So Case Western Reserve University, they have a medical research program there, and one of the things they wanted to address was malaria detection. And I think most listeners probably realize that malaria is a problem in developing countries around the world, but they may not realize that it's difficult to detect when you actually have malaria. The standard test, you have to take blood samples and send them off to a lab, and there have to be microscope tests. It's a long, complicated process that requires a lot of infrastructure. What they've done at Case Western Reserve is created a malaria detection device that's very quick and simple. It just takes a drop of blood, like from a finger prick, and it uses magnets and lasers. That's about the extent of my technical knowledge on the subject.
I was going to say, that's a fantastic description, magnets and lasers. Sweet. Just put some mirrors in there and you're good.
That's right. So what it does is it actually detects, it uses magnets and lasers to detect the byproducts of the malaria parasite, which leaves some iron-based residue in the blood. And so this device can detect that residue very quickly. So what it does is it allows screening large populations to detect there's people who have malaria and may not show symptoms, but who are carriers of the disease and can affect others.
What are you getting as an awardee? Is there, other than obviously recognition by the Patent and Trademark Office, is there a monetary compensation or mentorship or any other type of resource that's provided?
Yeah, so we have a award ceremony. As you said, there's the honorary portion, which is just recognition for their accomplishment. We host a ceremony here in the D.C. area and invite the winners to come and tell their stories and receive their awards. We try to put out information about that to let the wider community know. And then in addition to the honorary part, they receive a certificate for acceleration at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So one of their other patent matters, by the time they win the award, they've already got the patent on their humanitarian technology. But on one of their other patents that's in the pipeline, they can accelerate it and move it through the line more quickly.
That could be extraordinarily valuable. I mean, at the end of the day, and it's not just about time, but bringing something to market or being able to say you have that patent can be extremely valuable, I'm sure, especially when you're talking about some of these larger organizations.
Exactly, and that's the hook behind the program, to give companies some value for the good work that they're doing.
How many people are rocking up for applications? Like, what sort of application pool do you expect in 2017 here for this round coming up? Is it a couple hundred? Is it thousands? Is it hundreds of thousands?
It's usually been in the dozens range. I think our average is somewhere around 40 to 50. But those are very high quality applications, and there's a lot of work that people have to do just to get to the point they're ready to apply, because we're looking not just for the technology itself, but how is it being used? What is it out there in the world doing? It has to go beyond the invention conception stage, and it has to get out there to where it's actually helping people.
So take us through like the application process. I mean, are you talking that, they've got to demonstrate actual impact and over a certain period of time and these kinds of things?
Yeah, so the criteria are pretty open-ended, but we're just looking for you to demonstrate some sort of contribution that you've made. So this wasn't an accidental occurrence, but you actually tried to use your technology to help the less fortunate around the world. And then, as you said, the impact is the other portion of it. So what has been the result of your actions? And it's a bit flexible. Most of our winners are actually out there being used to help people around the world, but some of them are a little earlier stage in the pipeline. So for instance, Golden Rice won an award in 2015, and what they have done is they created a strain of rice that's fortified with vitamin A, so that people in poor areas whose diet mainly consists of rice don't suffer from all the medical problems you get from lack of vitamin A. And they've been working since the early 2000s to make it freely available for farmers around the world to grow and to cultivate and to feed people. Of course, there's been a lot of regulatory hurdles for them to get through to introduce this in various countries, and so they've gone through a number of field trials in Southeast Asian countries, and the product is just kind of now getting to the point where it's starting to filter out into the population.
So I kind of already know the answer to that. Well, I think I know the answer to this question, but from your last description there, but what's sort of your definition of helping the less fortunate? Because it sounds like many of your applicants are going to be either for-profit ventures or, technologies that will be, have a potentially substantial financial reward or potential remuneration for the organizations that use them. Is there any consideration there? Is that a part of the application process or anything like that? And the reason I ask is many elements in the humanitarian world today, they're very interested. There's a big push for open source technologies, these types of things. And I'm wondering, is that a part of consideration?
So the way we've structured our program, the judging considerations are financially neutral, which means we don't take into account whether you're giving it away or selling it. All that we look for is that it's reaching the people in need. So some of our winners are doing this as charitable work and basically subsidizing it with their other business operations. But some of our winners, their primary market is people in the developing world, and they found a way to sell at an affordable price to them and still make money for their own company. So we don't take that into consideration. We just try to look at the end result of, is this reaching people and improving their lives.
Over the last, 10 years that you've been looking at, is there anything that has won an award or a patent that's won an award that has been a real game changer disruptor that you can look back at it and say, wow, look at what's happened here over the last 5-6 years and how it's really just either, completely changed a market or, made a dent in a disease or something like that?
It's hard to pick out just one because a lot of our winners have such a huge global impact. So, for instance, one of our first group of winners in 2013, Gilead Sciences won an award for their HIV drugs, and they set up a network using generics manufacturers in India and Asia to manufacture the drugs at low cost and sell them throughout the developing world. And I think the latest numbers I saw, I want to say close to half of people in the developing world who are on HIV medicine are taking Gilead drugs. So we're talking, hundreds of millions of people around the world are benefiting from this. The FDA award winner that we mentioned before, over 200 million people have been immunized against meningitis. I think Procter & Gamble is another great winner from our first round of the program, and they make a little chemical packet. It's about the size of a business card, and you dump it into dirty water, and it can purify, I believe it's 5 liters of water per packet. And you just dump it in, you swirl it around for about a minute or so, and all the particulates and bad stuff kind of settles out to the bottom, and then you have clean drinking water to drink. And Procter & Gamble has distributed those packets around the world, and they've purified over 7 billion liters of water worldwide. So some of the numbers are just staggering.
Every single number you put on the table there has already blown my mind. I don't even know what 7 billion liters looks like. I don't think anybody does. It's probably the size of the Indian Ocean. Who knows? Is there an awardee that just kind of really caught you off guard? Like perhaps you said, I didn't even know this was a thing. It just really surprised you and you were really happy to give an award to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always blown away by the creativity and innovation some of our winners show. One that comes to mind from the first round of the program, there's a small company called Nocaro that operates out of Colorado, and they sell solar light bulbs for use in the developing world. And you might think, why do people in Africa need solar light bulbs? Well, because in a lot of parts of the world, they burn kerosene in their homes for light after dark. And it's a very poor source of light, so it damages their eyes. The fumes, they inhale the fumes, and it causes lung damage, problems with breathing. And it's a fire hazard. Lots of people, die every year from fires that are caused by these kerosene lamps. And so Nocaro is delivering these solar light bulbs to people. And even though people who purchase them, don't make much income, they can spend about a third of their income just buying kerosene. And they purchase these solar light bulbs, and after 3 or 4 months, it pays for itself. They've recovered the cost of not having to buy kerosene anymore, and it's a cleaner, better source of light that avoids all the health issues with kerosene. So that's one example that comes to mind. Another one that was surprising to me, American Standard, which is a U.S. plumbing company, has developed these latrine pans that they've distributed over 700,000 of them around the world in Africa and Asia. And it's just a little pan that people can put their waste in, and it seals it up so that insects can't get in and spread disease from the waste. And it's an issue that, I never even considered until I saw their application.
I was just going to say, what do you get to hear the story? You just said, what was the name of the company, of the American Plumbing Company?
American Standard?
Sure. So American Standard, of course, I've seen their stuff everywhere, all over the globe. Do you get to hear what motivated them to do that? Was it a part of their corporate, social responsibility? Was it some champion within the organization? Was it just, something that they stumbled upon?
Yeah, a lot of times it really starts with the inventors. They have a lot of very smart researchers at these companies working on their products, and sometimes they just get a really good idea that they think could help people. And they're usually the ones who start with the idea and come to management with it. But then, of course, it takes an effort from the entire company to develop that idea and run with it and get it to market and get it out to help people. So it's really encouraging to see all the people that jump on board to support these great ideas.
Why would you reject an application? Is there anything that, are absolute no-goes that aren't particularly clear, or are most applicants that come to you, it's really just sort of a tough decision between the couple dozen that you get to see who floats to the top, or are there some clear no's and yeses?
Yeah, so as far as our application standards go, the only reason we reject an application is if it contains profanity or inappropriate material. So other than that, we pass it on through to our judges, and I'll talk a bit about the judging process. So the judging process occurs outside of the USPTO. We have volunteers, mainly from academia, both professors and technology transfer professionals, so people who work in the patent offices of universities and are used to dealing with a lot of technologies. These people volunteer their time, and they sort through the applications, review them all, and give them scores based on, how well they've answered our questions and demonstrated the things that we're looking for. The results of that process, we take the highest scoring applications, and that goes to then a second round. The second round of judging, we have volunteers from different federal science agencies, so from places like Department of Energy, NOAA, FDA, the Centers for Disease Control, Department of Agriculture. All these people, all these agencies contribute their people to form a review committee and take the highest applications from the first round and make recommendations on awards. So most of the decision-making is out of the USPTO's hands.
That's fantastic. Is there anything that you've seen that has won an award that has essentially become what you would consider to standard practice now? One of the things that we're kind of obsessed with in the development and humanitarian world is, how do we move from pilot, shiny new object syndrome to, hey, this is a real game changer, and it actually did change the game in that, the standard ops are rewritten or everybody's using it now. Are there things like that have come out of the award?
It's difficult to say because we have so many different award winners across so many different types of technologies and so many different categories. I'm not aware of one that's, replaced everything else and become the standard in the field, but that's because our winners are addressing so many different challenges out there. And the one thing that we found is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one problem in one field doesn't necessarily work for another technology in a different field. And there can even be differences across countries. You could have a solution that works well in parts of Asia but doesn't work in parts of Africa. I mean, you've got cultural acceptance is one of the factors that goes into how successful these technologies are. You have to have buy-in, and the people have to, understand the technology, and it has to improve their lives. So one of the stories that I've heard, this isn't from our program, but at a conference, I was talking to somebody about building water supplies for villages in parts of Africa. And what they had done was normally the women would have to walk 5 to 10 miles away to the nearest water source to collect the water for the day and then carry it back to the village. And so these well-meaning volunteers had created a water purification device within the village there where they could just get their water from within the village and not have to do the long trek every day. And what they found was that the villagers weren't using it. The women were still going 5 to 10 miles away to get their water. And they couldn't figure out why until they started talking to the villagers. And the women told them that they liked having the time away because they could, when they're going to collect their water, it was a time for them to chat and catch up. And, it was a break for them from their other chores. So they actually preferred the longer solution versus the quick and local solution.
That's the first time I've ever heard that one, because usually it's exactly the opposite. That's interesting. Wow. You kind of sit at a privileged position in that, you get to see these applications come in. You're seeing new technologies come through. Is there anything that you see out there in the world right now that you suspect could either be a source for good, or that you maybe see an application for either this year or next year? And I'm, obviously at the tip of my tongue, something like blockchain or another technology like this, that you're kind of just waiting for that application to show up?
Yeah, I think we've had good applications in the past in a lot of the traditional humanitarian areas, so areas of health, clean water, nutrition. I think people readily understand how those inventions apply to helping the less fortunate. I think we would like to see better participation from the high-tech industry, especially in software. There's a lot of potential there as mobile phone penetration increases. I think penetration in Africa is even higher than in the U.S. Most people over there, they don't have access to traditional phone lines, and so they've skipped that whole generation of technology and gone straight to mobile phones. So I think there's a lot of room for really creative technologies that could improve their lives in terms of helping with literacy, helping with education, helping them find better markets where they can get a better price for their crops and improve their standard of living. One of the categories that we have in the program is standards of living, and we would definitely like to see more of those types of technologies come in, but so far we haven't seen a whole lot of them.
Can you remind us, just so everybody knows, what are the categories of applications? Can you just run through those?
So the categories we have are medicine, which is for any sort of medical technology, not just drugs and vaccines, but also medical devices and equipment and testing. We have sanitation, which is for clean water and removing other contaminants from people's environments. Energy is a big one, helping people who don't have access to an electric grid have sources of heat and light for their homes. Nutrition, for helping people get better crops and more nutritious food supplies. And then finally, living standards, which is meant to catch improvements such as literacy, education, and anything that helps people have a better standard of living.
And just so that everybody hears it on the podcast, your next round, it closes on December 8th. Is that correct?
Yes, the deadline's coming up soon. It's December 8th, but the good news is that there's still plenty of time to apply. The application is on our website, and it's very easy. It's very simple to fill out. We've had people who have filled out the application in one evening and sent it off and won awards through the program. So we encourage all your listeners to look into it and take the time to apply.
And is that just uspto.gov/patents for humanity, or where is it at?
Yes, that's right. You can just go to uspto.gov/patents for humanity, all one word, and that'll redirect you to the current page.
Fantastic. Last question, and I'm pleasantly, I love hearing your answers, because as someone who works in the Patent and Trademark Office, again, I don't think many people think, hey, they probably don't think about this stuff too much, but you're so clearly in tune with what's going on out there. How do you stay up to date? Who do you pay attention to? Are there Twitter feeds, websites, blogs, publications, periodicals? What are your go-to sources to stay up to date on what's happening out there, how people are getting help in the world, what the social sector is doing?
So as far as patent and IP issues, we have a very good news feed within the office that scours all the different publication sources, both media sources and blogs and anything in the patent community, and kind of collects the best stories for us and brings them to our attention. So we're very fortunate to have that service. In terms of more related to this program and information with the developing world, I Typically, there's so many different sources out there. A lot of it just comes from talking to different people who are involved in the field. I have a lot of good contacts I've built up through the years of working on this program, and they're always very knowledgeable and able to point me in the right direction when something new comes along.
The power of the network, it's always there. Edward, thank you for being on the show today. There's been a fascinating conversation. I'm going to, encourage people to obviously apply to the Patents for Humanity program. Just remind me, it's a rolling program, so if they do miss the deadline for December 8th this year, will it obviously be again the same next year, or will it be a different application deadline every year?
So it varies every year, but we're trying to move to a more regular schedule, so I would look around the same time next fall. But the latest information is always available on our website. If you go to uspto.gov/patents for humanity, it'll always tell you when the next round is coming up.
Edward, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us today. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the next group of awardees.
Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Hey guys, just a reminder that if you find value in conversations like these, take a second and give us a review on iTunes, or like our Facebook page, or most importantly, share this with somebody in your community through Facebook or Twitter, or even just email. And of course, if you always have a question, just hit me up on the blog or send me an email at steven@aidpreneur.com. You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.